Here, the programs are very smart, especially in the art of deception, in engineering and torture. And the simulation aspects are very strong to drag us down back into the illusion, and oftentimes the illusion is creating suffering as well for us, the reals. Of course, every spirited being here is pretty awesome. If only each of us could see how awesome we are in a way that is really connected to spirit and deprived of ego, which is going to be the big theme of this video. And we should know from a deep sense how valuable, unique, brilliant we are, each of us who is real here. But at the same time, this knowing or this memory is often taken advantage of by the programs to set up the reals as handlers toward other reals here. So ego is difficult to see. It is very self-deceiving. Self-deception is pretty strong, and it can be hard to see through it. So deep down, somehow, when we are maybe reconforted in some aspects of ourselves, whether it would be with friends or in therapy, though a lot of therapy is often gonna set up handlers and handlees together. But deep down, there is a memory of how brilliant we are in some ways. But then it's also about balancing that with the ego side, which wants to take control of this kind of information. And the matrix always tries for us to be in ego as well, and to take advantage of our ego parts. The ego is being tricked and seduced as well to make us think that we are serving the good guys when actually we're not. We're being brought into different mind controlling operations that are meant mainly to perpetuate mind control here. And how this work is to make us feel special, as if we are chosen, unique, plugging into the wound of non-recognition as well. Beings who have strong psychic powers, maybe from an early age, or they have developed them, also can develop strong egotic structures because they know how different they are from other people who don't have access to these kind of abilities. And that's where you find different gurus as well, guru type of archetypes as well. Now, if we don't pay attention to our ego parts, we're going to end up living the life the architects, the matrix architects have in mind for us. And we're going to be set up as handlers toward others. Because the dark ET factions, so dark alien factions, are always taking advantage of our egos part or unresolved egotic part to cause separation, cause division, create a lot of chaos and drama, and use our own programming against us because they often can see it way clearer than we can about ourselves. So it keeps us locked into these 3D kind of structures entwined with the matrix system and the deception here. When we place boundaries it can be because a certain amount of torture is being perpetuated. And with this work, we relearn how to place boundaries, and we remember self-love. So whenever we're placing these boundaries, it's because there is a reason for that. We wouldn't need to place boundaries if our boundaries were not invaded. We wouldn't need to let people know that they need to take a few steps backwards if it wasn't causing a certain degree of torture or abuse in our realities. But most of the time, what happens is that people get triggered and they get offended. They go in their default switchbacks, which are not nice to see in general. Instead of becoming aware of the impact they are having on us. And they project that you must be the perpetrator because it's too hard for them to, and too unconscious, they really cannot see it. It's hidden. So it's easier to deflect and project. Now you have a lot of battles of egos here happening simultaneously in this realm, and this lingering ego in each other of us needs to keep on being dissolved so it cannot be used and accessed. And also the ego rivalry and unresolved feelings linked to the wound of non-recognition needs to be identified and cleared. The matrix often try to push you into becoming passive aggressive or angry. So you would switch to a deceiver side of you that is self-deceptive. And some beings have it stronger than others, where they're more attached to the deception, to the lies they tell themselves and they tell others as well. And therefore, ego can blind them more easily and often does. You know, it's really hard to see our unconscious patterns and to identify them so they don't end up replaying over and over again, like an infinity loop system here, right? When you know, when you're in the shoes of the one being abused in a repetitive pattern, you kind of identify the pattern, and it's like an elephant in a porcelain shop for you, right? Like, it's like, how can these people not be aware? It's being replayed for the third time already. Are they not seeing the patterns? And you clearly see it, right? But it's also difficult to bring this pattern on the table because you can feel you're working on eggshells when you're dealing with such unconscious, deeply rooted patterns in others. You also find a lot of ego in the false awakenings that are offered by the new cage. And there is an encouragement generalized here to externalize the dark that is in fact inside, right? You have a lot of spirited beings here who have already made up their minds and who won't be changing their minds when new information appears. They're often dark because of that, because it's setting them up to be easy handlers. And therefore their expansion is slowed down, and by this fact that they believe they know it all. And the amount of ego can be really huge. And this ego is a false confidence. It's an overconfidence that is not rooted in the truth, but that is rooted in arrogance and false realities as well. You also have a lot of narcissism and egotic parts that are the results from the secret space programs and the MK Ultra programs also, which are designed to fracture spirited beings here. And it is designed to encourage the real to live in ego and pride. Therefore, they won't be in a real open dialogue, and there will be a lot of ego in communication, right? So ego is one of the big handling mechanism here. And if it's left unaddressed, it becomes quite a big problem. It is very challenging to build anything solid with people who have strong ego patterns that they're not working through, because these beings will be used and easily accessed and will be easily put under mind control through many different operations active in their lives. And they will distort the truth and project a reality that never existed. And it gets even more complicated when you take in consideration the self-deception systems of alters. And alters are also programmed to get offended and programmed with a lot of ego as well. So you're dealing with a ton of personalities and egos. It's quite complex to deal with. You have beings who completely live in 3D ego mind, or beings who are ruled by their ego. And you have some minds also who are very corrupted and infiltrated by artificial intelligence with very little connection to spirit. You find also a lot of reals who are choosing service to self and self-serving paths. Now, the ego is one big mechanism that is used to perpetuate mind control here. And it is used also to create reality distortion, images about yourself through the guilt you might experience when in contact with the ego of other people, the way your self-esteem is being targeted, the way the image you have of yourself is being distorted due to, you know, the heavy mind control that you find active in the different cults of personalities that are active out there on the game map. And also when others are struggling with strong egotic parts, they also gonna feed back to you a distorted version of the image, you know, you are, that is their projection, you know, of you that has nothing to do with the truth. And they will often also be used to convince others that you are indeed that version that they think they are dealing with, when they are just deflecting terribly, strongly, you know, their unresolved ego. We find also a lot of engineered feuds out there. It's pretty obvious when you read tabloids or, you know, consult the celebrity press, that a lot is being done to pit people against each other, especially when they're real. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes maybe at the beginning there was not much of a problem, or a little unease gets really amplified, or people under mind control who are heavily emotionally manipulative are going to be used for their psychic skills to create chaos and put ideas in the mind of people and influence the image, you know, different people have of each other. I've got a personal experience 10 years ago where I was reunited with another spirited being in a workshop, and the simulation kicked in for us to be compared. And it was very difficult to start building a relationship because of that, because of how the unconscious in others was playing. And also, you had a lot of spiritless beings who were not real, so they are even more easily accessed. So this happened as well between reals, especially if they don't have like strong affinities at the beginning. Now with people who are deflecting a lot and projecting the most, this is also a way to be set up as a handler, always going to be. And handlers are programmed to oppose that energy of you walking in your power, and time is always on our side to reveal handling influences. Now, some reels or many reels might be too involved in 3D instead of mostly out. And a lot are working from ego, with a large ego that is unbalanced, and it gets even more complicated when they are into control. Because the ego is also a place of lies and a structure that makes it difficult for people to be made aware of their unconscious patterns. So it's easier to project it onto the exterior, and you must be the bad guy because they really don't want to see. I mean, it's very difficult when we talk unconscious, what it is they are truly doing. Even when we are finding this situation of repetitive patterns, it's deeply seated. And sometimes in the presence of other reals, other reals sometimes are very confronting with whatever they can perceive of the unconscious, and it can be very abusive and intrusive. But other time, it's just the unconscious just reveals by being in the presence of each other if we are high frequency. Because being in the presence of each other is a frequency, and if we're talking allies, it has a frequencies of truth in it, then it becomes easier to pierce through the frequency of lie and engineering. That's how I just dismantled alone one line of engineering that was trying to settle in my consciousness when I was in the presence of other spirited friends. And I did that not when I was with them, but when I feedback with myself the evening, I just knew, what was true and what wasn't. I don't think it's really in my signature style, if I really want to be true to myself, to be very confronting as a being. It's not how I'm built. I'm built in other ways. And I don't know if it really works anyway. I mean, anyway, you'll be confronted with a lot of self-justification coming from ego, and why people adopt certain behaviors. You will find ego attachment, ego obsessions around the identity, the personality, and the learned ego. The ego is definitely a point of access by the MK Ultra programs to have a lot of controls on the lives of the reals here. Now, you also find love bombing techniques, which are going to try to target your wounded ego and to hook in to your core wounds, right? I find it's rather challenging to deal with people who are extensively in ego, who are demeaning, or who subtly or not so subtly put you down. And I also find it challenging to exchange with beings who are easily ego seduced and who fall so easily for any mind controlling operations in their lives. Because there I will find a lot of the false realities just between me and them. And it's not pleasant because the conversation cannot be truthful. Now, a lot is being done for us to be encouraged in ego-based behaviors. Oftentimes they will be reactive as well. And handlers also can really work on inflating your ego. Thus you become a much poorer version of yourself because you're much more powerful when you walk in the truth of who you are with a balanced ego. Because ego is also used to keep us anchored here, maybe more trapped, and keeping us in lower functioning. The desires coming from the ego and the motivations are going to lead a lot of spirited beings to do mean and cruel things as well, because they think they're in pain and they think another person is inflicting them pain when they cannot see that it's just their deeply seated patterns. You also find a lot of handlers trying to appeal to your ego, to flatter your ego, but at the same time, you will feel that it doesn't really feel like they really believe in what they're saying, or they're sending double message about you. The spiritual ego might be the worst of them all. It's an ego that really also feed off from an identification to different stories. And I think our ego patterns are used as major blind spots in our lives. And if we don't pay attention, you can find a lot of unconscious motives and hiding beneath different behaviors that are adopted, such as revenge, resentment, pride, anger, repressed hatred, or external blame consciousness. Now, if we follow our ego, our conditioned personality, we're going to find program needs. And these needs can be programmed by the MK Ultra programs as well. We have different lines of, the lives that are engineered for us. And if it's not this one, then maybe it's going to be this one. But you have to trace the engineering happening. And any desires that is based on ego is being heavily hijacked here. You find also a lot of false version of reality based on ego seductions, and a lot of false realities that are pushed in our corners of realities by dark ET faction. And you also find a lot of spirited beings who have a default mechanism. When they are being triggered, they will switch back to completely twist what is happening. And they will have false memory about it, which means that they will see reality completely not as it is. They will see themselves as the victim when they are the perpetrator. That's why you needed to put boundaries to them. And sometimes they will never break their false memory through their lifetime here. They will also be used to spread lies about you, about the being that you are. And if people don't have a discernment that is refined enough, they will end up believing these stories. And that's okay, because, you know, if we work on this level, we need to be working with people who have enough discernment that they won't be falling for any mind controlling operation launched against you by different handling influences in their lives. So the ego sometimes get out of proportion. It's also used, you know, in the triangles that are created when you're dealing with a handler, and they use a third party reinforcement. Generally, the handler has this third party under mind control, oftentimes using their ego to appeal to them and twisting their perception upside down. So the third party is going to perceive reality the way the manipulator is perceiving reality, which is distorted. And of course, this third party is being used to gaslight you and to, you know, increase the amount of torture that is happening in your life. And every spirited being here has been dealing with these triangles, whether they themselves perpetuate that or not. Every wheel is being set up in some ways and is being tortured in some ways as well. Now, you know, you get better at dealing with it. And if you walk the path doing the work, you're gonna meet people with whom you can really build trust. And this number is gonna grow every year. And you're gonna know who you can trust. And that is priceless. That is really solid something with which you can do and build things. And generally, the handler is himself being manipulated by dark ET groups and under mind control in many different ways. And when we spend time with a dark handler, there is always an influence, so it can enhance our egotic structures. They encourage ego in us, so it makes it grow. So you can watch that in yourself as well, you know, when looking at older video clip of you, you know, you can trace back when the ego is being more active than you would like it to be. And it's also often the cabal loyal alters in others that are encouraging you to be in ego, because it's also the way they can further hook into you, and you're being pushed in a more self-centered version of yourself. It's a diminished version of yourself than the one you would be without these ego influences if you were walking closer to spirit. Now, it's hard to talk about these ego patterns with others, since everyone can get offended pretty quickly. And we are easily led from our negative egos as well. And the more we attach to our egos, the more easily accessed we are, because the alien factions really love to be using that against us. And for beings who repetitively ignore to see the effects their behaviors are having onto others and refuse to take responsibility, They will just end up deflecting it onto the others. Now, here in the simulation game, we also find a lot of AI forces that are programmed to demean and trigger the ego of spirited beings constantly, trigger your wound of non-recognition, different things. And the spiritless are also accessed constantly to target your self-esteem and point towards the little details that do not really matter in comparison to the whole amount of progresses you just recently made. You know, you need a tap on the back from spirit and you get like, you know, a finger pointed from, you know, NPCs, which is very insulting, you know, that your unconscious would be revealed by a spiritless being that is accessed by the program, because it's not even the spirited being, the spiritless being that is conscious of it. It's just streaming, targeting from the programs. That's also why it's so insulting, therefore triggering ego. I'm sure it's familiar in your corners of realities too. What's important is that you know the quality of what you are doing here to rise, and I think we can trust in that. And just rising in awareness about how these AI triggers are meant to encourage depression and affect our moods towards discouragement, you know, and some kind of despair as well. So the matrix likes for us to be triggered in our egos. The ego does slow us down so much, our evolution, our revolution, and keeps us in cognitive dissonance and denial. And also the programs tend to punish us for setting boundaries. Others are being used for heavy, heavy gaslighting, making you feel like you are being difficult, like you're the one who, you know, you're too good to be true, and, you know, your image has to be destroyed. We see also a lot of jealousy and rivalry as well. And it's just not nice to be caught in ego traps set up by the matrix. You would just feel the frequency of it is not nice. And to really overcome resentment, you have to be aware that it's not really the beings. I mean, the beings are under mind control from forces that have control over their minds that are hidden. And they are the one engineering this behind the curtains. I found some comfort in that knowing and that tracing back the signatures. Though it's too bad sometimes the beings don't have a little bit more self-control or awareness to break their programming down. In the end, dealing with all of this brings you back to self-love in the frequency of what is real, just encouraging us, if we connect to spirit, to go over ego, detaching from it, rising from the low frequencies of ego, not reacting from it, and working on real mastery that goes way beyond ego and egotic pulls and drama setting, and, you know, clearing the space from this negative ego stuff, and working on going back to alignment, not taking hasty decisions, keeping on integrating this ego and where the programs wants to lead you through it. I do enjoy the most exchanging with others who know how to work on their egos, and work through it so it does not become a huge problem in our relationships. And I will end this video with two examples that recently showed me some unconscious patterns and the way it hook into your mind to create engineering in your life. Recently, I revisited different hive minds were influencing my thoughts more than 10 years ago. And when I was connecting to the electronic music scene and music also, it was kind of designing engineering in my own mind through reconnecting to all these frequencies. And the way I got aware of it is that when this line was starting to design in my mind about the action that I could choose to adopt from ego-based, programs, well, I started to burn myself with the reason I was burning, which is probably a strong tell that it's not the right road for me to go. And I can tell you that it's just sometimes the programming is really strong for us. And it feels so real and tempting. And the whole body is reacting to it, especially with music, right? You just create a lot of different rush and hormonal stuff happening, emotional as well. So it's intense. That's why it's so heavily used for big derailment. And my last example is also kind of linked to that. It was an event I was considering to attend, but also coming from engineering. And when I thought about bringing it to some of my friends that maybe I wanted to drag with me in this operation, which I can be really convincing sometimes. Well, I drop things on the floor, right? So it shows you clumsiness, and clumsiness shows you you're unconscious. Therefore, I think it's better for me to abstain to attend these events. I generally don't attend many events except maybe the ones I'm creating. And so that clumsiness, if you pay attention to just the little details, then you would know what is programming and, what is not. And I'm sure it would have been not a terrible event because I also scanned the aura and the aura was good. But what can there be if I just use that time to do the real work? And also because it's events where it's so easy for the programs to access the spiritless, but also most of the spirited beings. So these are spaces that are challenging and where the energy, it's not really you who are setting it. So why not sometimes work on keeping on setting more the energy yourself? And I think that's one of the reasons why there are so many things happening on the game map with so many events proposed. I mean, it's created for the reals not to have a lot of space and to be constantly mixed with energies, and some are mind controllings, some are draining. And sometimes you spend your whole day doing all the things you need to be doing to keep your game up. And sometimes you're just gonna have 15 minutes, 30 minutes, or 1 hour where you can really do something that create progress in your life, and that's how we keep moving on. And in these little spaces that we create, there is the real resistance, and that's where real progress can really be made.